Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Behind the Counter, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of retail technology to know about all the trends, insights, and all the hot topics directly from the people who live and breathe this every day. I'm your host, Vicente Yañez. So nowadays, digital coupons on your phone, loyalty points, and the self-checkout are commonplace in any store. It's table stakes by now. However, in a legacy world where you have an old system, those three things are often talking different languages. If you have one hiccup, the associate has to come over, the line stalls, and the convenience of self-service vanishes, right? That friction is not necessarily a hardware problem, it's a connectivity problem. Joining us today, we have some of the guys that have a platform that solves this connectivity problem. Louis Lee, marketing manager of North America.
Yep.
And Matt Miles, director of grocery for North America.
Yep.
That sound right?
Yep.
Did I get it
Great
right?
to be here.
Perfect. Welcome, guys. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you so
Great.
much.
I'm really glad to have you guys here. So, talking about NRF and talking about all the things that are on the show floor, and talking about DN's experience in retail, what do you guys think is the biggest friction point that we are yet to solve in retail technology?
So it's an interesting question, right?
Mhm.
So when you start talking about friction for grocers in particular, they have it at different areas depending on the grocer and where they are in their technology evolution, right? So one of the areas that are constantly being kind of overlooked
Right.
is, like you mentioned, about self-service, right? When you start talking about that self-service journey, and then you have those friction points that pop up, coupons, age-restricted
Sure.
items, or just, misscans. We find a lot of unintentional shrink happens at self-checkout because there's not an associate nearby. So how do you solve that without increasing labor is really key to that, because
Okay.
grocers are on very, very thin margin lines, right? They can't just put more hours at a problem. So we have to look at technology to solve that. And that's where computer vision, AI really helps the customer's journey and remove that friction, right? It's not about identifying shrink. It's about making sure that the customer has a great experience without having any of those hiccups that you mentioned, right? None of those time bombs. No one wants to wait for a shopper assistant to come over.
Yes.
They want a nice, easy, streamlined process.
Yes.
By having that streamlined process, that creates a repeat customer, right? And that's what we're trying to solve for. And that's where we always look at the customer journey and understand where technology fits in versus just trying to, pigeonhole and jam it in, right? It needs to actually solve something that's useful to a customer. And that's why Diebold Nixdorf, that's where we come into play. And that's where we built our strategy around.
But you're talking something bigger than just the platform, because what you're describing, like where technology fits and discussing this and understanding what the use cases are for the retailer, it goes beyond just the box. Yeah, we're not just looking at the physical machine that sits at the counter for the cashier to do it. You're talking about working with the retailer, understanding their strategy, their vision, and also understanding who's the customer for that retailer.
Exactly.
To me, that's a piece of technology that is way more encompassing than just the point of sale UI, right?
Yeah, you hit it on the head, right? And that's where a couple of years ago, we actually created a group inside of our retail segment that we call advisory services.
Okay.
And it's basically a group of consultants, and all they are is retail experts. So we have former grocers, directors of IT, operations folks from retail, and they help us solve those problems, right? They help us identify where in that transaction we can apply some technology to remove friction. And so that advisory services team really gets in on the front end of any sort of engagement. And we actually benchmark. So this year, Louis can talk about, we released and created a self-service excellence benchmark report where we paid third-party consultants to go into grocers and other retailers and video and actually benchmark all of that transaction time. So then we broke it down into micro journeys, right? So we broke down scan time, approach time, how long it takes to tender, fresh produce lookup, like how long does it take each one of those micro journeys in the overarching self-service journey, right? And then we can help retailers identify where we can save a second. Because when you start talking about grocery and retail, every second matters because
100%.
because the quantity of transactions is so large, right? So if you have 1 million customers a year, that's 1 million seconds saved.
Yes.
And that's just one,
Yes.
right? So if you have 60 million, 100 million customers a year, it's a lot of time savings.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just equate to customer friction reduction, it actually increases throughput. Right, so every second increases the throughput, which then means that you may need less self-checkouts or less staff lanes, so that way your total investment for IT is lower.
Louis, do you want to expand on that program? That sounds quite interesting.
Yeah, so what you're referencing is the self-service excellence benchmark, and we partnered with Incisive
Okay.
to survey both consumers, 2,500 consumers in the U.S.,
Mm-hmm.
about self-checkout and how they feel about it, and then also 132 retail executives across 73 North American grocery banners
Okay.
about how they felt about self-checkout. And one of the things that stood out to me in a gap that we identified was in terms of technology.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not a question of what's the biggest tech or what's the biggest issue with the tech,
Sure.
but you phrase it of what's the biggest issue in technology. And when
Right.
you look at technology, those executives, they were separated into two camps. You had the IT folks and you had the business operation folks.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the priorities, the IT folks are prioritizing customer experience.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, they want to see the customer have a good experience. And of course, everyone at tier 1, tier 2 retailers, they want people to have a good experience. But the business operation folks, from the data that we're seeing, is their main priority is shrink prevention, right? And in some situations, those two might pull against each other in terms of adding friction
Yeah.
to make sure that things are getting scanned the way they should be getting scanned. Sometimes that slows down the user journey.
Yeah.
And at Diebold Nixdorf, we feel like we have the solutions that are going to help the shopper experience and the business operations at the same time. And we do that through ways like our Dynamic Smart Vision in terms of AI to both make sure that with things like produce recognition,
Right.
that can quickly tell what's happening and speed up the ability for the shopper to self-serve. Also with age estimation
Okay.
in terms of one of the biggest reasons why I have people in my family who I won't name, the reason why they go to assisted checkout is because they're buying adult beverages and they know that they have to show their ID
Right.
to an associate anyways.
Right.
We have solutions that solve for that and allow the shopper to self-serve in
Okay.
that manner with age estimation. So those are some examples in terms, and then making sure things are getting scanned.
Right.
We piloted this. We have this in store right now with customer Intermarché, a global grocer out of France.
Okay.
They were able to take down misscans from 3% down to 1%.
That's huge.
And as Matt mentioned earlier, in terms of when you look at grocery and you're operating with razor thin margins, moving that 200 basis points is huge. And at the end of the day, in terms of making the throughput better,
Right.
it's good for the shopper. And then saving, making sure that margin is protected for the business
Yes,
operators.
yes.
It's a win-win situation.
Because in my mind, the idea of a self-checkout in paper is fantastic. In the stores, in a good demographic or a demographic in which there is not a lot of intentional mis-scans or intentional asset loss, it works. But whenever you start looking holistically at the whole demographic of the country, there are all these other use cases, right, in which it might not be a great asset right now, the way it is on the legacy self-checkouts, if we want to think of them that way. But in my mind, that also translates to business opportunities or job opportunities for the people in those communities, right? Not that they can get a job. My point was that those stores lose their business, that affects the people living in that community, right? The whole economy of an area, of a county, of a state gets impacted by it. So the fact that stores are able to operate safely, that increases the value of a company. I come from Mexico City, where we have small grocery stores at a neighborhood level, right? The fact that we all can buy there, that there is jobs created in the local store, you create a relationship with them. You know, a lot of the Midwest and the South have that feeling for the local store that you go in. If technology can ensure that store keep creating that human value as well, in addition to protecting their investments for technology, but also creating better experiences for changing generations, for changing customer habits. I mean, we're talking about a huge impact on what you guys are doing.
Yeah. So, they're called grocery deserts, right? And you hit it on the head, right? Our solutions aren't meant just for enterprise customers.
Right.
Yeah, Intermarché is a great customer of ours, and we absolutely adore them, right? But we also want to make solutions that are open and more modular for our customers, right?
Right.
So there isn't a certain tier where you have to be to be a customer of DN's, we make solutions that are able to help identify, where it needs to be happening in your local neighborhood market, right? Make sure that we have a solution that can work in that area, and the needs of them are different than a large international grocer. So we had to make solutions that are very modular, so that way it fits, and you can take pieces of the platform that fit into your ecosystem. So that's why everything that we build is also open, right? Because being able to identify and work in those small regional grocers is key, right? You need to be able to have the technology advancement, but not the dollar spend of having, the full solution stack. So that's why we make everything modular, so that way you can plug into all the existing ecosystem as well.
That's a great balance to have. From an engineering perspective, I like the idea of working with a platform that allows me to do things, right? Because as a developer, I like to build things. Thinking of it as a developer for a retailer, I like when a retailer is able to create new things that your platform didn't have, not because it's missing, just because it was not needed, and it's a specific differentiator or a unique thing for the retailer, right? Like, I'm able to create this specific module just for my company, and it's just mine, and it's great, and it works. Or just, let's simple than that, just integrate with an enterprise service that I already built, right? If you could pick one thing to help any retailer on this journey of either modernization or adoption, because I think also of the smaller stores that may want to expand out, right? We are ready to take that jump and start building out more stores. We're in a small footprint right now, 3-4 stores, and we're going to start growing up. What would be one thing that you like to help them immediately?
So it's about starting with the data, right?
Okay.
So our advisory services team, understanding what you're actually trying to solve for, right? Like, are you going to grow and expand organically, or are you going to purchase and do an acquisition, right?
Sure.
I think a lot of, when you start thinking about expanding, acquisitions are a bit of look at that as like, oh, maybe it's a bit too difficult with a technology standpoint, running two different ecosystems. That's where having a partner like DN, where we have those open and modular systems, enables you to quickly integrate some of the legacy stuff into a modern architecture without having to rip and replace everything. So, we intentionally made sure that the way that we construct things is built so that way you can do stuff like that without having to go off and run two different side-by-side systems. We can have, all of our systems can talk to multiple POS systems. So if a retailer's running two different legacy POS because of an acquisition, that doesn't have to change the underlying self-checkout or anything else. So from our Smart Vision AI, it can talk to anything. So we really try to reuse the existing infrastructure. So we took a different approach to how we approach Smart Vision as well. So we use all the retailers' existing CCTV feeds. We don't require new cameras bought and sold by DN. So we construct the system, we took it back, went back to the data and said, how would a retailer want this? We talked to our retail partners, and they have already made this investment in assets in their store. And how do they maximize that and stretch, the longevity of that? Because every dollar counts in retail. 100%. So we need to make sure that they're getting that ROI and minimizing the TCO. So by doing that, utilizing the existing CCTV, minimizing the GPU spend into the store, right-sizing it, right? So we offer different levels of GPUs that are needed by what the retailer needs. So we can take all your camera feeds, or we can extract just the high-value areas. Again, even though that it's a platform, we have to make it modular so that way the retailer can really decide exactly what fits into there and what business use case works for their individual locations or their enterprise.
Having this kind of platform also, to me, allows them to move strategically about the transformation, about the modernization programs or their adoption programs, not having to rip whatever I have right now and have to bolt the new one in, but being able to continue my operations and surgically translate piece by piece or module by module until I get into the new platform. That's a very powerful thing, because I have seen, let's say 20 years ago, an acquisition program and a technology transformation program will take years to achieve, because you have to assess, you have to do these, and you have to adjust a lot of things, right? And especially if you're, and I'm purposefully teeing up this question, because there is one part of the DN architecture that I want to bring up, especially if you are doing acquisitions across countries, right? If you are adopting a technology or a brand from a different country, that is not just a country boundary that we're looking at culture, legacy, different layers. And I know that DN has I don't remember exactly the name of it, but there is one of the modules on the platform, on the dynamic platform, that allows you to control that. Is that correct? the multiple internationalization layers and that stuff.
Yeah, so on our Dynamic Retail platform,
Yeah.
like we architected it, so we're a global brand, right?
Yes.
So we
Yes.
have existing retail customers across the globe, across all the continents, right?
Yeah.
So we needed to make sure that in our new cloud native, cloud built point of sale,
Yep.
Dynamic Retail platform, we weren't just porting old code
Yeah.
and having that tie to legacy, right? So it makes that migration a bit longer.
Easier? Yeah, on the legacy one, yeah.
Yeah, from the legacy. But if you're starting net new, it's a lot faster. And part of that is we had to be able to support all of our international customers.
Yeah.
And as we started looking at our install base, right, we have customers that have fuel, convenience, grocery, retail, specialty, and you had to create a platform that would enable all of that.
Right.
So then we started breaking them into modules, right?
Right.
And one of it being the country pack, right? So we have the country pack separate.
Yes.
We had so the ability, right? You can have one enterprise view of that customer. You have one enterprise platform, but individual countries can manage the needs of the local market
Right.
via the country pack without changing the core, right? So that was really key to making sure that we can deliver quick regulation changes, right? So there's different governments all around the world, right?
Yes.
And everyone wants different taxation.
Yes.
So you need to be able to quickly react to different local needs. And you can do that either via the country pack or even lower level from the retailer owned areas, right?
Yeah.
And again, we like to say it's customization by configuration,
Right.
because we
Right.
want to enable as many quick changes as possible. So by doing that via configuration and not code changes,
Yeah.
developer required, it makes it a lot easier. And that's, I think, what you're looking at in terms
Yeah.
of like that
Yeah.
country pack. Yeah.
And I have to apologize because I told you that I was not going to ask you about specifics on the platform. But when you brought up this French retailer, like, yeah, because the platform allows you to do global stuff. Luis, what's one piece of technology that you think is just hype versus one that you're like, no, that's going to be the real game changer?
What I'm hearing from retail executives is that from the top down, they're getting asked, what are we doing with AI?
Okay.
And that's kind of like asking a chef, what are we doing with food?
Yeah, great.
And
It's a great analogy.
Are we talking cereal or are we talking salmon?
Sure.
And tying it to Matt's earlier point about where folks should starting with the data is, to me, foundational, because we talk about rip and replace, and rip and replace feels heavy because it is heavy. But what about copy and paste? Just because
Yeah.
it worked over here doesn't mean it works for you.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to start with the data, and that data starts to filter up what's important, what are the priorities across functions.
Right. Right.
Because it's not just one team, it's multiple stakeholders
Right.
that need to be enrolled and bought in and what's needed. And you have to identify your priorities. You have to identify certain use cases that the technology is going to support. So in terms of what's overhyped, anything that you're throwing out there that's not based on data,
Right.
on your data, that's
Right.
overhyped.
I agree.
The game changer is whatever's going to change the game for your shopper based off of your data and your priorities. That's what's important.
I love that. I love that perspective because point of sale generates a lot of data. Sales transaction, there is already data that comes in. There's a lot of data that is consumed live during a transaction. Plus, you have a lot of other data that is just happening at the store at every time. And if you throw in something like IoT, we're talking about a lot more data points, right? And as a systems designer, I like the idea of the data because I need to know what am I representing and how am I storing it, or why do I need it for to begin with, right? Just because some other might not be the right place to put it, I don't need to store it long term, etc., etc., etc. But it also translates to customer information, right? If you're walking into a store and you want to be identified, hyper-personalization, I think is one of the ones that I keep hearing on possible use cases for AI. Like, the ability for a store to know who I am based on different data points, right? It doesn't have to be always my phone number or my email address. But I agree on how data should inform those use cases of AI.
Absolutely.
I love that. Are you guys integrating anything into AI currently? Are you looking into experimenting on that regard?
So I don't know if you want to call it experimental, but
Sure.
So I don't know if you know this, but we also have 2,200 badged techs in the US, right? So we have all this data from point of sale failures,
Yes.
and all across what's happening in the store.
Right.
So we are actually started using machine learning a couple of years ago in our retail data, in the break fix maintenance services, to be able to proactively look at things, right? So we started looking at it and like, I'm just going to give this an example, right? I love to give this example because it actually is real world. So we, with all of our history in the data, we know how often or when a printer blade is going to start failing.
Yeah.
So if you know how many cuts it's going to do before it fails, well, we can monitor that.
Yeah.
And then we can actually create a service ticket and have a tech, the next time he's in the store, replace that printer blade.
Right.
So that way we take and fix it before it ever becomes an issue.
Right.
And what
Right.
that means for the store labor is that the associate's never on the phone opening a ticket.
Yeah.
So we solve a problem before it ever existed.
Yes.
So we've been using machine learning and AI for a long time. It's just in different areas of the business, right? So whether it be, as you mentioned, like in our reporting,
Right.
all this data, we obviously aren't analyzing it by hand. So
Sure.
we're utilizing AI inside of our advisory services area to start seeing how exactly are retailers and consumers using the solutions. So we look at it as like a continuous improvement loop, right? So just because we deploy a solution doesn't mean that it ends. So, if we take our AI, shrink reduction program and then just look at the misscans at self-checkout,
Yes.
well, you solve misscans, and we started off with like 4 different use cases, like misscans, label stacking, and then product stacking.
Right. Right.
Well, now we're up to 24 use cases that one solution solves, because we kept on identifying more and more areas where we could help the grocer streamline and reduce friction. It wasn't about stopping the shrink. It was about reducing the friction, because some of it, again, was unintentional.
Yes.
So
yes.
when you start adding those use cases, and you can give the customer that nudge to say, hey, did you do this wrong? Or let me show you how to do it the correct way. That's where it came from. And this all started actually from fixing the friction point of produce recognition, going through a pick list. Then we fixed that, and it's like, oh, well, can you help with the misscans?
Right.
Can you help with the product stacking? So we've been looking at it in a couple different areas of the business, and those are a couple examples.
But all of that speaks also to attention to the business, not just to your platform, but to the business side of your platform, right? Just because you have a successful set of use cases and some error handling doesn't mean that something else couldn't happen, right? You're looking at a user experience that could be improved with a little bit extra technology or with a little bit of a new feature, a new capability, which in the end, that to me is forward thinking, right? That's what a flexible platform like DN allows retailers to do. To stop thinking of solving my problems, what I have now, and shutting down fires or just keeping afloat on my operations, but start thinking on new capabilities and thinking ahead. What are you guys' very optimistic perspective of retail in the next 10 years? Where do you think we will be in about 10 years?
I'll let Lewis go first.
One of the things I wanted to build off of in terms of the using AI for predictive analytics and predictive maintenance, I think that cannot be underestimated, because how can you measure a user experience, whether it's good, positive, or negative, if it never happened? What does that look like? Okay, so SCO is not available.
Right.
Now
Then you lose all of that source of data.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you measure that if it didn't happen? And I don't know about you, but for me, there's been situations where it's self-checkout not available. And in terms of the predictive maintenance and using AI to do that, cannot be underestimated, because in terms of TCO, what's the return that you're getting if your SCO is just sitting there and not being used?
Yes.
And then you got to pull labor into that.
Yeah.
And then you got to roll a truck. You got to pay for that too.
Right.
To go fix it. In terms of the predictive AI, in terms of predictive maintenance, we can get out ahead of that.
Yeah.
We can solve problems before they become problems.
Keep that business running, continuity of operation, and as a customer also, right?
And
You mentioned the case, like get on the self-checkout yourself.
But let's talk about from the customer perspective.
Sure.
Tying back to self-service excellence benchmark,
Yeah.
we surveyed 2,500 shoppers. The most important thing to them is the scanner working? That's what came up in the results.
Interesting.
Is the scanner working? Now, the piece that I want to pull into that is what it's really saying is this thing working?
Yeah.
Is it available? And at Diebold Nixdorf, we do a good job at making sure uptime is there.
Yes.
I think the number is I want to be conservative here because I don't want to misquote.
99.8.
Thank you. That can't be underestimated.
No.
And I think making sure retailers have the tools in place
Right.
to maintain that and continue that it's kind of this idea of you don't really notice the value of something unless there's the absence of it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And technology is working in the background, and in some sense it's invisible, and it should feel invisible.
Yes.
But then when it's not invisible, it's because it's a big metal box sitting there. It's not being used.
Yeah.
And we want to avoid that. And hopefully 10 years from now, that won't be the case.
I love that. I love that perspective because from a user, the way they frame the question, like, is this working? What you were describing is a bunch of answers to that question, because is this working might be because the barcode was illegible, because they scanned it too fast, because a plethora of reasons, right? So the question from the customer side is like, is this working? Can I use it?
And one other thing I want
Sure.
to bring in from the Self-Service Excellence Benchmark Report, which you can find at dieboldnixdorf.com.
I want to read it.
Great. I'm glad you want to read it and share it. So shoppers are saying they want scanners working.
Yes.
And then executives, in terms of what they surveyed, they're looking into investing in things like biometrics.
Okay.
Right? So that's cool and that's great. And sometimes you got to do that if you're in IT and you want to innovate and you want to show that you're thinking. But at the same time, it's like there's a gap there.
Yeah.
It's like your shoppers are saying, we want to be able to hear it beep.
Sure. Yes.
And you're thinking of other stuff. And sometimes they're investing in it and the shopper's not even using it.
Yes.
Right? So I think just kind of identifying that gap and hearing your shoppers, right? And finding that balance, yeah.
I love that. Matt, what do you think is going to happen in the next 10 years?
You know, there's been a lot of conversation about, the brick and mortar store is dead.
Mm-hmm.
I don't buy into that.
I agree.
I still like going into my stores. I still like shopping. I think there's a lot of use cases where you need to have drone delivery and you need to have, same day delivery or next day delivery, right? A lot of use cases, a lot of things you don't need to touch and feel. But sometimes a lot of people like me like touching and feeling to, the stuff to make guacamole.
If you go to a grocery, definitely. I mean, picking avocados is an art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Like I love talking about guacamole because it's one of those use cases where, if you're a self-service shopper that's buying guacamole and we can make it easy because, you have the avocados, you have the tomatoes, the cilantro, the limes, the onions, right? You have all of it. It could take a long time to enter that manually without some sort of AI assistant and that friction. So
just stand in there, like turning them around or like finding out the tiny PLU and make sure that it's not wrinkled so it doesn't scan. Yep.
Yeah. Or you type in onion and nope, it's a red onion, but the lookup doesn't actually dynamically identify all the onions, so you have to then type in red.
Yeah.
It takes a while. Then you have pepper, is it jalapeno? It's just a lot. It's a lot of friction. And, I like guacamole a lot. Like my husband and I, we spend a lot of time eating a lot of food and making a lot of food. And by that, I mean, we have to have fresh produce, right?
Yes.
And so when you start looking at what retail looks like in the next decade, you're still going to have that personal connection. Shoppers like me and you like going into stores, I'm sure Lewis does too.
Yep.
You want to go into a retail environment. You want to interact either with technology or human. And I like having those choices and those options. So for me, what I see in the future is, removing a friction from the experience, right? Making sure that I can create my shopping list. Maybe I share that list with my spouse, right?
Right.
And having one unified look at that and identifying me, as you mentioned, like identifying, the shopper, but also identifying it as a family unit.
Yes.
And understanding you can have a shared experience, a shared list, a shopping list, so that way you're not just always forgetting the milk or the eggs, whatever they asked you for, right? You have that one unified view of it, so you can go into the store and have it, but it's also about making sure that final 90 seconds of the transaction and the experience is there, right? So that's where you need to focus on is those last 90, right? You want to make sure that you're leaving that customer with a great experience at the end. And that last 90 seconds is from one of our retail partners here, Global Grocer, and they focus on the last 90 as well. And I love that because every time that I have an experience that may not have hit the mark for me, it's usually in the last 90 seconds.
Yes. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's the one that sticks to your mind, right? Because then you stop thinking of the brand because of how well everything was on the shelves, how great layout they have. You start thinking of them because how that last part of the experience was not that great. And it may change your mind about visiting them in the future.
Exactly.
I really like that. Guys, I want to thank you very much for your time and for being here. This was a great conversation. I love working with you guys. Diebold Nixdorf is a really great platform. I get excited because pretty cool stuff. I want to thank you for your time here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
No, thank you. Thank you, everyone. See you.